I have a confession to make. I have become obsessed with sweaty European people. I should probably explain that. It all started one summer a few years ago when my air conditioner wasn't working very well. One day I went down into my basement and noticed that there was water coming out of my furnace. Wait, it can do that? What followed was a bit of a learning experience for me, discovering how air conditioning systems work. You see, hidden inside the ductwork, right above the furnace, is what's called the evaporator coil. It's the part of the system that gets cold. You blow warm air through one end and you get cold air out the other. It turns out that what had happened to me was that most of the refrigerant had leaked out of my air conditioning system, which meant that the pressure inside dropped. And since pressure is proportional to temperature, the temperature also went down, which meant that the evaporator coil was getting way colder than it was supposed to. So cold, in fact, that the moisture in the air started to freeze to the coil and it became covered in ice. This ice then started to melt, which was where all the water was coming from. I had to get someone out to fix this, so it was a somewhat expensive learning experience, but I was excited to be able to sleep properly again through some warm summer nights. It was from this mindset of renewed appreciation for air conditioning that I began to hear stories of a brutal heat wave that was sweeping Europe at the time. I read about people all over the continent suffering and sweating in temperatures over 40 degrees Celsius, baking in apartment blocks that felt like ovens. Don't they know how to turn their air conditioning on? Is their AC not working like mine was? Wait, that doesn't make any sense. How could a whole continent's air conditioning be broken at the same time? I then found out that air conditioning just isn't very common in Europe. Less than 20% of homes there have some sort of AC. A question, then, took hold in my mind. Why is air conditioning so lacking in Europe? These are supposed to be a bunch of relatively rich and well-developed countries, right? So what's going on here? Why are these people all so sweaty? I then spent a frankly embarrassing amount of time trying to find an answer to this question, reading through online forums like Reddit and Quora. I finally concluded that the answer comes down to two reasons: cost and cultural attitude. First, cost. Air conditioning is just a lot more expensive in Europe than it is in North America. If you want to add AC to your home in Europe, it's going to cost you more. Interestingly, because of different choices in home heating systems. North American homes generally use what's called forced air heating, where warm air from the furnace is circulated through a series of air ducts to heat the home. In Europe, radiant heating is much more common, where either hot water or steam is circulated through pipes to a series of radiators. Now, there are pros and cons to both forced air and radiant heating systems, but one clear pro with forced air is that it's fairly easy to retrofit an air conditioning system. Add an evaporator coil and ductwork above the furnace, and your heating system is now also a cooling system, reusing those same air ducts. You don't have an easy retrofit option with radiant heating. And if you do get AC installed in Europe, it's also going to be more expensive to run the thing. On average, electricity prices in Europe are about double what they are in North America. There is also a very different cultural attitude in Europe towards air conditioning. People generally think it's an unnecessary luxury. I came across a lot of comments on those online forums about how people in Europe are much more concerned with keeping their homes warm during the winter, with statements to the effect of, "Our homes are designed to keep the heat in." This is quite the contrast with a place like Canada, which has winters that get far colder and last much longer than most Europeans would ever think possible. Yet, according to some numbers I found, over 60% of Canadian homes have at least some form of air conditioning installed. So even if you can afford to install and run air conditioning in Europe, you're going to have to deal with your neighbors thinking that you're a decadent wuss. Now, maybe our use of air conditioning in North America can get a bit excessive. I usually bring a light sweater along when I'm in the office over the summer because it tends to get rather too cold. But I still much prefer North America over Europe. I'm glad to live somewhere with plentiful air conditioning infrastructure so I can sit around at home in comfort and indulge my morbid fascination with sweaty Europeans.